Story 1. The Cabin by the Lake. I'd always liked quiet places. Somewhere away from the noise of cities, where the night sky was black enough to show every star. That's why, one early spring weekend, I drove 4 hours out to a secluded lake in northern Maine. I had rented a small, old cabin from a local family who lived about 20 minutes away. It was the kind of place that didn't have cell service or streetlights, just the sound of water against the dock and the trees creaking in the wind. The cabin was basic, but clean. A wood stove sat in the corner, and there were old fishing rods on the wall. It felt like stepping back in time. There was a dirt road leading in, but it was barely wide enough for my car, and by the time I arrived, the sun was already setting behind the tree line. I unpacked, made some coffee, and sat on the porch, listening to frogs croaking across the still lake. I remember how quiet it got after dark. It's a kind of silence that almost hums in your ears. No cars, no planes, no people. Just me, the lake, and the distant rustle of branches. It was peaceful at first, but something about it also made me uneasy. Like I was standing on the edge of something vast and empty, and it was staring back. That first night, around midnight, I heard something moving outside. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or maybe a deer. I turned off the lantern inside, trying to listen better. The footsteps were slow, deliberate, circling around the cabin. The floorboards on the porch creaked. Someone or something was right outside. I held my breath. After a few seconds, I whispered to myself, probably just an animal. But when I peered through the thin curtains, I didn't see anything. Just darkness and the faint outline of the trees. Still, the sound had been too heavy to be a raccoon, too steady to be random. The next morning, I checked around the porch. There were footprints in the mud. Human footprints, bare feet. The prints started from the woods, walked around the cabin, and disappeared back into the tree line. My stomach dropped. I told myself maybe a local had wandered by, but it didn't make sense. It was freezing the night before. Who would walk around barefoot? That afternoon, the uneasiness grew. I decided to pack up a little early the next day, but I didn't want to ruin the trip. I tried to fish at the lake. Every so often, though, I felt like someone was standing just out of view. There were faint ripples on the other side of the lake, even though the wind had died completely. That night, I locked the door, made sure the windows were shut, and tried to read by lantern light. The silence felt thicker. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a noise. Not footsteps, this time tapping. Light, rhythmic, tapping on the back window. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My heart pounded so hard, it almost drowned out the sound. I forced myself to turn my head. Through the thin curtain, I could see the faint outline of fingers, just fingertips pressing slowly against the glass. Someone was out there, watching. I whispered, "Who's there?" But there was no reply. Just more tapping, like they wanted me to open the window. I grabbed the flashlight and slowly crept closer. The tapping stopped, and I pulled the curtain aside. No one was there, just condensation on the glass. And 5 distinct, long handprints. I barely slept the rest of the night. At first light, I threw my stuff into the car and started driving down that narrow dirt road. About a mile out, I saw something that made my stomach turn. In the mud on the side of the road, there were more of those barefoot prints. A long trail, like someone had been walking behind the cabin all night. They stopped right in the middle of the road and turned into the forest. When I dropped the keys off with the rental family, I mentioned what I saw. The woman just stared at me for a long time. Finally, she said quietly, "You should have locked the back window." Her husband shot her a look that shut her up. I didn't ask anything else. I never went back to that lake. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night in rural areas, I swear I catch a glimpse of a figure at the edge of the woods, barefoot, watching. Story 2. The abandoned gas station a few years ago. I worked as a delivery driver for a small company that often sent me out on back roads. So one night in late autumn, I was driving through a stretch of highway in Nevada that seemed to go on forever. No towns, no exits, just 2 lanes cutting through desert. Around 10 p.m., my gas light came on. I hadn't seen a station in nearly an hour. When I finally spotted a faded sign that said gas next right, it felt like a relief. I turned down the road, which was barely more than a cracked strip of asphalt, and after about 5 minutes, I saw the station. It looked ancient. One flickering light above the pumps, a small building with boarded up windows, but the sign said open, glowing weakly in red. There was no other car around. No houses, just the wind whistling through broken glass. I hesitated, but I didn't have a choice. I got out, my boots crunching on loose gravel, and swiped my card at the pump. Nothing happened. Then, from inside the building, a light flickered on. I stepped closer, peering through a dusty window. Inside, the shelves were nearly empty, except for some old snack wrappers and faded magazines. And behind the counter stood a man. He was tall, with gray hair slicked back and a blank expression. His eyes didn't seem to focus on me. They just stared. I pushed the door open. A small bell rang, but the sound felt hollow. "Hey," I said, "the pump's not working." He didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he smiled. "You'll need to pay inside," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it in years. I paid him in cash. He handed me the receipt with a shaky hand. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Everything inside smelled stale, like old wood and something sour. When I turned to leave, he said quietly, "Not many people stop here anymore." His smile widened just a little too much. Back at the pump, the wind started picking up. The light over the station flickered violently. I filled up my tank as fast as I could. I glanced back at the building. The man was standing at the door now, just staring. He wasn't blinking, just watching me with that smile. I finished, got in the truck, and drove. But when I checked my rearview mirror, the open sign was off. The building was completely dark again. I told myself maybe it was just some weird local guy. But 20 minutes later, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was another sign up. It had another gas station. This one was bright and busy. Kia pulled in to grab some coffee and told the cashier about the creepy old station down the road. He frowned and said, "What station?" I pointed back the way I came, shook his head. "That place burned down 15 years ago, and no one's been out there since." I laughed nervously at first, thinking maybe he was messing with me. But he walked into the back and returned with a faded newspaper clipping taped inside a drawer. It was about a fire at an old gas station. 3 people had died there. I recognized the photo of the owner. Same gray slick back hair. Same blank stare. I drove that highway dozens of times after that night. I never saw the station again. It's just a blackened concrete pad where it used to stand. Story 3. The Forest Road. When I was in college, I took a summer job at a campground deep in the mountains of Oregon. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was decent, and I liked the outdoors. My job was to do maintenance, clearing trails, checking campsites, making sure people followed the rules. The place was beautiful, but isolated. Once the sun went down, it was pitch black out there. One night in July, a couple didn't return to their site after a day hike. My supervisor asked me to take one of the small maintenance trucks and drive down a narrow service road toward the deeper trails to look for them. The road wound through thick forests, no lights, no traffic, just my headlights carving through the trees. After about 15 minutes, I noticed something strange. The forest around me was completely silent. No crickets, no rustling leaves, just the hum of the engine. Then, up ahead, I saw something on the side of the road, a single shoe. A woman's running shoe lying in the dirt. I stopped the truck, got out, and shined my flashlight around. The trees seemed to close in, their branches arching overhead like a tunnel. I called out, "Hello? Anyone out here?" But my voice just vanished into the darkness. No answer. I put the shoe in the passenger seat, thinking maybe it was from one of the missing hikers. About a mile further, I found their car. It was parked haphazardly on the shoulder, both doors wide open. The keys were still in the ignition. Inside, there were 2 water bottles and a folded trail map, but no sign of them. I radioed it in, but the signal kept cutting out. Kay could only make out fragments of my supervisor's voice through the static. Then I heard something, a low, drawn-out creaking sound from the forest, like a branch bending under weight. Then again, closer this time, swept the flashlight into the trees, but saw nothing. The darkness was too thick. My pulse quickened. I decided to get back in the truck, but just as I reached for the door handle, a voice whispered, "Help." It came from the trees. It wasn't loud. It sounded wrong, like someone trying to mimic a human voice. I froze, every muscle locking up. "Who's there?" I called out. No answer, just silence. Then another whisper, this time from a different direction. "Help me." It was higher pitched, like it was copying itself. I jumped in the truck and locked the doors. As I turned the key, the headlights swept across something standing at the edge of the tree line. It was a figure tall, thin, too thin. Its arms hung at strange angles, and its head tilted sharply to the side. Swear it looked like it was smiling, but the face was pale, featureless, like stretched skin. I floored it down the road, the truck bouncing over roots and potholes. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, it was gone. But the forest around me was alive again. Crickets, rustling, like nothing had happened. The next morning, the search team found the couple's car, just like I had described, but not a single trace of them in the woods. No footprints, no clothing, just that one shoe I'd picked up. I gave it to the rangers, but they never found anything else. A week later, I couldn't drive those roads again without remembering that voice, that smile.